China, China, what a shame! China, China, what a shame!
These protesters, mostly Chinese, are outraged because the city of Pasadena, California, has agreed to allow a Chinese Olympics float in the Rose Bowl parade. The float is co-sponsored by Avery Dennison, the business label maker. Many of the protesters are members of Falun Gong, a spiritual belief system outlawed by the communist dictatorship in China. Others are Tibetans or Burmese. Many are victims of, or relatives of victims of, brutal, murderous communist Chinese oppression. College football is what the Rose Bowl parade is about. These protesters are highly offended that Pasadena will allow a regime notorious for human rights abuse to join a parade to celebrate an American college football game. Unlike our giddy, eager to cash in China U.S. university administrators, the Rose Bowl parade protesters know the truth about China's leadership. John Lee is a Falun Gong activist in the United States. John is the one in the coat and tie. He says in China, having spiritual beliefs can cost you your life.
If people do the meditation, like they hold this place in the park, immediately they'll be knocked down on the ground and being arrested to the place they call the Lao Gai or labor camp without a trial. And many people, then they torture you to ask you to deny the practice. Some people do not deny, and so as a consequence, over 3,000 people, Falun Gong people, have been tortured to death in the police custody.
This is the real face of the communist dictatorship known as the People's Republic of China. Notice the giant incision. This imprisoned Falun Gong believer had his organs harvested for resale on the global medical market. It's the work of a brutal, totalitarian regime many U.S. companies and universities are clamoring to do business with, and human rights be damned. Americans blinded by profit and a bandwagon mentality look the other way. China's communist dictators brutalize any of its citizens who believe in God because that's anti-communist. This is what happens to Christians who practice real Christianity in China, not the version approved by the Communist Party.
I think many big companies are trying to make some excuse for them to make money without caring about human rights in China.
The small dark object lying across the middle of the snow tracks in this photo is the body of a Buddhist nun shot dead by Chinese troops on September 30th, 2006, as she and other Tibetans tried to flee communist oppression in Tibet. Buddhism is a religious belief, of course, and being a Buddhist nun can get you murdered by the People's Liberation Army. The brutal oppression of minorities in China is reminiscent of apartheid in South Africa decades ago. Back then, U.S. universities took a principled stand and divested themselves of South African stock holdings to protest human rights abuses by the apartheid regime. For example, in 1978, a University of Michigan faculty committee wrote, "The university has a responsibility to consider ethical implications of its investments in those cases where an extraordinary social evil is apparent." But South Africa didn't have the profit potential of China. Professor Bill Kaufman, a University of Michigan whistleblower and critic, was there when his university opposed apartheid.
Here at the university, we were all upset about apartheid in South Africa, and we divested stock in South Africa, etc. But the South Africans look like good, innocent people compared to what's going on in China. But the university administrators are considerably hypocritical about this. And they just overlook what's going on in China because so much money is coming here from China that, well, okay, you can buy our soul.
More recently, the University of Michigan has fought for diversity in admissions practices all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. On rights in China, Michigan, like most U.S. universities, has nothing to say. John Lee and his fellow Chinese Falun Gong believers can't understand why Americans are turning their back on minority rights and abuses in the People's Republic of China. He scoffs at what he hears from the pro-China crowd.
Hey, once the economy grows, the human rights condition will improve. Even so, they have no evidence in history to tell them that.
So the Chinese float will be in the 2008 Rose Bowl parade as the city of Pasadena and much of America, including academia, turn a blind eye to human rights in the People's Republic of China.
Human rights is not a game.
Human rights is not a game.
No human rights, no Beijing float.
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 Shame, shame, China, shame.
Shame, shame, China, shame.
Human rights is not a game.
Human rights is not a game.
No.
I'm Vince Wade. This is our country.